As promised, I will show you how to use my LTN rail system. First, I'm going to talk about how to use the blueprint book. Then I will explain how it works. And at the end, I will show you how you can create your own stations if you don't like my one locomotive, 4 wagon trains, or whatever else you want to change. LTN stands for Logistic Train Network. The logistic in the name refers to the same thing as the logistic robots. The idea is that trains are requested, they go and pick up items, they drop them off, same as robots. The trains are also not specific to one item. Just like logistic robots can pick up anything and drop it off anywhere, these trains can do the same. The best way to start is to go through the book and explain what all of these are. These are the pickup stations, the drop-off stations, and the actual train for solid items. These are for fluid items. If we go to the pickup stations, you can use this blueprint to make your own stations. All of my stations are designed for 1 locomotive, 4 wagons. This one is for 1 to 4 input belts. This is for 5 to 8 input belts. And this is for 9 to 16 input belts. And you can see it's pretty spaghetti, so if you can find a way to reduce the size, please let me know. The drop-off, you can see that they're pretty similar. The trains themselves, they just have the orders stored in them so that you don't have to design them yourselves. For the fluid stations, there's only one version because you can use all of the pumps at the same time. And same for the drop-off. We also need depots. You can kind of think them as an equivalent to a roboport. And we also need some way to refuel the trains. And I've given you two options. I have city blocks, which is what I personally use, but I realize my city blocks are pretty large and city blocks are just not as good in space age because of legendary quality items. In any case, if you do want to use my city blocks, this is just the city block itself, but this doesn't have any of the rail. Then this has the rail, and then this has an extra rail on the inside. This is to help trains queue up for the stations. For the actual LTN, you have the depots, you have the fuel center, and you have a little thing here which you only place once, and I'll explain later. However, most people are going to prefer to not use city blocks. And here we have again the fuel center. This is the same idea, it's just much smaller. And there's a drop-off which will connect to your tileable depots. If I go to my tileable depots, I have two choices. There is the slow and fast version, and I'll explain later how they work, but it's pretty simple. You first place one of the two starts, let's say the slow, and then you want the tileable blueprint. You line up the right station of the tileable blueprint with the left station of the start. You click and then drag to the left. Okay, so here I have an empty city block, and this is just for convenience, but what I will do is use the tileable blueprints and put all of the stuff down to show you how to use it. Let's go into the no city blocks blueprint and let's do tileable depots, and let's do the slow start, and maybe let's place it over here, and then we go back. We select the tileable, line up and drag. This belt here is where the fuel comes in, so let's also add the fuel drop-off station next to it. Let's add it over here. Now that I've connected them, we also need to connect the output onto the input. Next, we need to place the fuel center. I'm going to place it somewhere here. You can see it also comes already with the train available. Let's also add a few trains. Now let's add a couple of pickup solid stations. And let's do 1 to 4 belts. We'll place one over here. And here is the parameterization. Out of all these parameters, you only really need to be concerned with the first two. This one you will probably never use, and these ones you should not change. We only need to set what item this station will pick up, and let's just do iron plates. And this is what the max train limit for this station will be. Since we're using an LTN type system, trains are only dispatched when they are needed, so it's very unlikely that you will ever encounter a deadlock where trains are stuck. But if you want to avoid any deadlocks, make sure however you queue up your trains, you have enough room for the max train limit. Personally, I think for most stations, 3 is good enough. We can also check out its name, and you can see it gets the name of Iron Plate Pickup 1 to 4. For reasons I will explain later, I have placed another pickup station again for Iron Plate. Let's also add a drop-off station, and let's make it 1 to 4 again. With a drop-off station, we have one extra parameter. We're again requesting the item, and we'll set it to Iron Plate. And this is how many iron plates we're requesting. This is similar to the minimum items requested in a requester chest. By default, it is 40,000. The rest of the parameters are the same. I will set this to 1, and let's just keep the requested items to 40,000. The name for this station is again Iron Plate Dropoff 14. Let's also add a fluid station, even though I will not demonstrate how they're being used. It's the same idea. Here the parameters are a lot simpler. Just choose the fluid you want. Let's say crude oil. And the max train limit. Note that the station name is now the item or the fluid. And then it's fluid pickup 14. Finally, for a fluid drop-off station, we need to choose the fluid type. And let's say crude oil again. We once again are requesting a certain amount. And by default, it's 300,000. We have the max train limit, and the rest you should not change. And the station's name is crude oil fluid drop-off 14. But we're not going to use this, so let's just delete it. Now, one issue that we're facing is that the trains do not have any type of fuel. You will need to bootstrap somehow in your game. Place some requester chests, probably here. Add some requests for whatever fuel you have, probably rocket fuel or nuclear fuel. But for now in the editor, I'll just change these to infinity chests. These 4 stations, they're normal stations, so once you have somewhere to pick up fuel from, then some of these trains will go and pick it up, drop it off here, and then this train is used to refuel this station, which will fuel the rest of the trains. Take note that because the depots have priority by default, for example, this one has priority 253, and as you go to the right, you have higher priority, and to the left, lower priority. When you place a new train, ideally you want to place it at the depot with the highest possible priority that is available. In this case, it will be this one. If you do this, it will automatically take fuel, but if you place it on any of the other ones, then it is trying to go back to the one that has the highest priority, and therefore it will not get fueled automatically. You can fix this issue by just not having any priority on the stations. But if you want to keep the prioritization, go to the trains that have this issue, set it to manual, wait a little bit, and then back to automatic. They will have to do a trip to get back to the depot, but there's no other way around it. As you can see, none of our trains are doing anything because these stations do not have any iron plates. So let's add some. And if we click on one of the steel chests, we can see here how many iron plates we have, and I'll just pause. If we zoom out, we'll see that once this gets to over 16,000, which is enough for one full train, one of the trains will leave the station. There you go. Then it will fill up, it will go to the drop-off station, and then it will come back to the depot. Fills up, goes to the drop-off station, and back to the depot. And a bit after it leaves the station completely, another train will leave to go pick up more. There it goes. And this will continue until this station has over 40,000. And we can watch this over here. So it will need one more train. And then no more trains will be dispatched. There you go. A couple more things. The lamps here, so what's the current train limit at this station. And you can see here it's 3 because we have enough items. Here it's 0. And here it's 0 because we have all the items we have requested. Also, what if you made a mistake during the parameterization? The easiest way to fix it is to go back to the blueprint, paste it over exactly again, and then change anything you want to change. So let's say we want to change this to 3. Actually, let's use it here. And I'm going to change the max train limit from 3 to 4, and you'll see the 4th lamp will also light up. Change it to 4, and there you go. Another way to change the parameterization is to go to this constant combinator and change things here. But unless you understand well how all of these work, I would only recommend changing the max train limit over here. Finally, I need to go into how to use my city blocks. First, let's look at the actual city blocks. This is again without any rail, with normal rail, and then with extra rail for queuing. These are all aligned to the absolute grid. Using the absolute makes it a lot easier to line up. So if I go to the map, you can just go and click and paste them wherever you want. This also means that if I want to put one city block onto another, let's use the fuel center for example, I can just click and that's done. Very easy to align. You also need to place this small blueprint somewhere, anywhere on each planet where you're going to use the depot city blocks. And you need to place only one of them on each planet. So just take it and put it literally anywhere. Now, of course, here I'm in the editor, so there's a global network for electricity, but obviously you need to normally connect it with your electricity network. Finally, for the depots, this has 56 depots. Let's place it here. There's only one parameter. This parameter says, what's the copy of this depot blueprint on this specific planet? So the first time you place this on novice, you're going to set this to 1. If you want a second copy, you're going to set this to 2. If you put another to 3, and so on and so forth. If you then go on Vulcanus and you want to paste down this blueprint, you're going to set it again to 1. And on Vulcanus, you would need again to place one copy of this. You just also need to add the trains themselves, and that should do it. The fuel center city block has nothing special. It's again the 4 fueling drop-off stations, which get combined onto the refueler train over here, which will go to these stations for the depots, drop off the fuel here, it gets passed onto the depots, and that's pretty much it. Okay, this is a cut. After I finished the video, I searched on Reddit to see what anyone else has done in terms of LTN, and I only found one that was comparable and had some ideas which I did not have, and some things were different. But I ended up changing a couple of things to improve the stations further. Now there is also an optional bonus priority that you can set between 0 and 100. This is in case you want to add some extra priority to some stations on your own. One of the things I copied were these display panels. So now you'll have 3 display panels. This will tell you how full the station is. This will tell you what's the current train limit, and then how many trains have been assigned to come here. As I add iron plates, this will change. On top of that, the solid drop-off stations have one extra functionality. Often in drop-off stations, for various reasons, items are not well balanced between the chests. So what I've done here is I've added a couple of combinators. This takes the total number of iron plates divided by the total number of chests. So this is the average number of iron plates. And then I'm also subtracting a number that has to do either with the stack size or a maximum of 32. And then every inserter checks if the items in the chest are higher than the number coming from here, as you'll see here. And with this, any chests that have too many items will have priority on unloading. This will help prevent trains from getting stuck on the stations, as well as if for some reason your belts are only being taken from one of the 2 lanes, then this will balance it Bear in mind that I haven't tested these changes. Now, specifically about my station blueprints, I also have some nice statistics here. You can see my stations are set for very high throughput. Whether that's useful or not is up to you to decide, but anyway. These two things have to do with the inserters on the outer side. So these ones and these ones. And it's based on the bells as inputs. Each bell does 240 items times 4. They can actually do up to 960 items per second, and same with the legendary stack inserters. So this does tell you there is no reason to upgrade them on the outer side. On the inner side, because they load to trains, there's always a point to upgrade them. It actually takes 3.1 seconds to switch trains. So that means if I have a train here that just finished loading, from the moment it starts to leave the station, the next train that is already waiting over here, it will take 3.1 seconds until it starts loading. Let's assume that the item here is iron ore, which stacks to 50. And these numbers tell you that once again, the outer side of the inserters, it takes this many seconds to load enough items for one full train load. The inner inserters, and here I'm always assuming that you're upgrading them to legendary stack inserters, they will take 1.4 seconds to load a train. So 1.4 seconds for the inner legendary stack inserters to load the train, 3.1 seconds to switch trains, but it takes longer to get enough items for an extra train. If the items that you are picking up stack to 20 or less, you can actually do non-stop trains. This also means that there's no point using one of my stations that has 5 to 8 input belts. This one that has 1 to 4 is more than sufficient. Let's go to the 5 to 8 version. Here we can see that with normal bulk inserters, we can do up to 1440 items per second. It's actually a bit more, but I don't know exactly. You can definitely do 6 stacked belts. It can't do 7. I don't know the exact number, but with 6 you're fine. And of course, the legendary stack inserters, they can do the full belts. And now for items that stack to 20 or less, I'm suggesting use the 1 to 4 belts instead. And now for items that stack to 50, now this station can do non-stop trains. And then if we go to the 9 to 16 version, this was already at its maximum, but the legendary stack inserters can actually do 3,840 items per second. So the maximum is 4 belts per wagon. With this setup, you can actually do 100 stacks and 200 stacks trains non-stop. For the drop-off stations, you have kind of a similar idea. Here, it matters a lot more that you have stack inserters because you're dropping off items, and the bulk inserters can do 1/4 as much as they can do when they pick up. And then it's the same idea, and we can go on to the next one, and the next one. For fluids, here it's a lot simpler. I just have for normal and legendary quality pumps. It takes 3.92 to switch trains for pickup. This is how long it takes with normal pumps to fill up the train, with legendary pump to fill up the train, and then the total, which is filling up and switching trains. So based on these numbers, you can figure out what's the max throughput of this station. Surprisingly or not, these are slightly different for drop-off. I guess the animation is a bit faster. Next, I will explain how everything works. It's easiest to start with the fueling because it's pretty simple. You have a drop-off station for coal, one for rocket fuel, one for nuclear fuel, and one for legendary nuclear fuel. The coal is combined through this belt, it's passed on to here. The rocket fuel has priority via this splitter, and then the nuclear fuel has priority, and then the legendary nuclear fuel has priority. This is then fed to the locomotive and the train itself. The fuel is then dropped off over here, and there's nothing really special here. It's pretty simple. The station has this name, and the only thing that changes is whether we have the train limit to 0 or 1. It becomes 1 if all of these are below these values. In this case, we have normal nuclear fuel, and we have above 500, so this is not set to 1. the actual refueling train. It will stay on the pickup station over here until either its cargo inventory is full, or this other case, which you need in case two fuels are mixed. So for example, imagine you have a bunch of coal, but you're transitioning to rocket fuel. If the fuel is mixed in here, you may end up with a case where some of the slots are not full, one of the other, and that's because these chests are all full with, let's say, only rocket fuel, and they can't take any more coal. But let's say one of these slots has less than 50 coal, and the train will get stuck because it can never full its cargo inventory. As for the fuel itself, it comes through this belt, gets fed onto a steel chest, and then there is an inserter placing it on the train. Of course, if you don't want to deal with any of the fueling, you can replace this with requester chests and just bring in your own nuclear fuel, and then you don't need any of this or any of this, or the belts or these inserters. Next, we need to look at the train schedule to understand what it does. These train schedules should be saved onto the blueprinted trains themselves, so you don't have to set them up yourself. But if for some reason they don't work, make sure that you copy them exactly. The wagon trains are within this group of trains, wagon 1-4. In their normal schedule, they have this, and this is just to refuel. It looks complex, but there's not much to it. And then there's two interrupts. There is the return to depot, do I not have enough fuel, or is somehow the destination full or no path? Then go back to the depot, and this target destination and conditions are exactly the same as the one over here. We have the item pickup 1-4 or solid pickup 1-4, and you can see under some conditions it will go to a pickup 1-4 station, such as iron plate pickup 1-4. It will full up, and then it will go to the iron plate drop-off 1-4 and empty. All of this so far is fairly simple. The complexity is over here. This is needed in order to differentiate between other groups of trains. This type of train, which is in this group, will only go to the correct stations. To understand this a bit better, you can see the fluid trains, for example. All of this is the same, all of this is the same, but the group here is different. The name of the interrupt for pickup is fluid instead of item pickup. And then over here, the stations are also different. This is fluid pickup 1-4, fluid pickup, fluid drop-off. If I did not have this on either this group of trains or the solid group of trains, then both fluid trains and solid trains would be triggered by the rest of the conditions. This condition is more for debugging. The trains that are on depots should always have empty cargo inventory. If they ever have any inventory and they're not empty, then something has gone wrong, and please let me know. And then the two actual important conditions are these two. The way it works is that we're going to check if in the circuit network there is a signal that is negative. If it's negative, then that means that we are requesting a train for that specific item. If the iron plate signal has a value of -2, this means that we want to request 2 trains to go pick up iron plates. And then finally, this signal will make sense later, but it ensures that we do not send more trains than is necessary. But a quick way to understand this is that without this, if you think about it, if I have a bunch of trains like I do here, if this signal for iron plates is -1, there is nothing to make sure that I send only one train. All of the trains will get the same -1 signal, so all of them will be triggered to go pick up iron plates. Now let's look at an actual pickup station and see what happens. Aside from all of the things over here to the left, the only thing I do over here is just connecting all of the steel chests onto the green wire. This green wire connects to this combinator and this combinator. Let's look first at this combinator and also these three combinators. They kind of go together. This combinator, we're taking how many iron plates do we have on the station, and then we divide it by a value, F, which is how many iron plates will a full train have? That's 100, the stack size, times 40 per wagon, times 4 wagons, 16,000. This L value tells us how many trainfuls of iron plate do I have on the station, ready to go. In theory, this L value could be used to set the train limit here. Since we want to set a max train limit, we're gonna do this via the rest of the combinators over here. The L value from this combinator is passed on to this combinator and this combinator. And then this combinator checks, is the L value higher than the max train limit? And then we pass the max train limit that we set, which is 4. On the other hand, if it's less than or equal, then we just pass the L value that we have. The output from these two combinators is combined over here and simply checks which one is higher than 0 and outputs L. So in this case, we have the max train limit, but it converts it to a value of L. Finally, this L value gets passed on to the train stop and sets the train limit to 4. This L value is also passed on to the lights, and they're pretty simple. They just turn on based on 1, 2, 3, or 4. The other combinator where the iron plates are passed on to is this one. This combinator once again takes the value of the iron plates and then divides it by what's the maximum number of iron plates we can have in this station. That number is also divided by 100. If I divide this by this number, which never changes, which is 2304, so 100 times less than this number, then I'm getting a value P of 100. We can also see what's going to happen if I take some of the iron plates. We can see that the P value is decreasing. The P value is supposed to be priority. And this P value is passed on again to the train stop and sets the priority of the train stop. The more full the train stop is, the higher the priority of the train stop. I don't know if this is desired behavior by whoever uses my blueprints. By default, trains will just choose the station that is closest to them as long as the train limit allows them to go there. I don't know what people prefer, but in vanilla, this would cause trains to often go, for example, to only one place for iron ore. Let's also look at the constant combinator itself. This is the max train limit, which we set in the parameterization. This is how many wagons the train has, which is 4, and this is why we should not change it. This is how many steel chests we have per wagon, and as you can see, it's 12. This is how many slots every chest has. Normally it's 48 for common quality and 120 for legendary, and other numbers for other qualities. These are two values that the parameterization itself calculates on its own, given the other values. Once again, F is for full train. It's how many items per full train load. And M is the maximum number of items when the station is full, divided by 100. It's just used to get a priority. The division by 100 is to save one extra combinator. Finally, we have this little thing here. If I go to the train stop, I have the retrain count checked, and it's given by C. So this is how many trains are either on the station or coming to the station. This is then sent to this combinator. It's multiplied by 1, and it's outputted as iron plate, which is then passed on with a red wire onto the radar. As I said with the train orders, when I have a negative -1 signal for iron plates, that means I need one train to come. But once I dispatch one train to come to this station, then I no longer want this to be -1. Since 1 is coming over here, C will become 1. Therefore, iron plate will become +1. And therefore, the total iron plates will become 0 in the network. It's a bit more complex than that, but I will get into that later. Now let's look at a drop-off station. Once again, all of the steel chests are connected with the green wire. The signal from them is passed on to this combinator. Here I have the value M, which stands for what's the minimum requested items. So for example, here we requested 40,000 iron plates. We subtract how many iron plates we have, and we have how many are we actually requesting at the moment. Since it's negative, we're essentially not requesting any. This R signal is then passed on to these two combinators. This combinator checks what's the requested amount, divided by how much is a full train load, and that gives me how many trains I need to request. Bear in mind that the desired behavior here is that if this R, for example, had a value of 1, I still want to request a train, even though that will give me 16,000 instead of just one extra iron plate. However, the way division works in Factorio, if R is less than 16,000, then this will give me an output of 0. So in order to account for this is why I have this extra combinator. If R is greater than 0, then simply add one extra train. The output of these two combinators is combined and sent to these two combinators, which is the same thing as we faced before. If we have less than the max train limit that we set, then send the T value. And if we have more than the max train limit, send the max train limit value. And then once again, the output of these two is combined and sent to this combinator, which again does the same thing, translates the signals to the signal L, and sends it to the train stop. Now let's look at how the priority is set on this station. Once again, we have the remaining items requested signal, which is sent over to this combinator, and it's divided by what's the minimum requested, divided by 100. So we're requesting 40,000, which divided by 100 is 400. So if we divide the remainder by n, this gives us the priority. And if I remove some of these items, we can see how it works correctly. We can say we're requesting 70,000. That's roughly 43% of 40,000. So in this case, the less we have, the higher the priority, which makes sense. One common issue in vanilla Factorio was for certain items that you needed a lot of, but you could not provide enough of. For example, when you first get advanced circuits, you may have a pickup station for them, but you probably won't be producing that much of them. But you still need them for various items. You need them to make processing units. You need them for modules and beacons. And you need them for signs. This means that likely you will have many drop-off stations for advanced circuits. If the drop-off stations manage to remove all of the advanced circuits from them before the pickup station has enough for a full train load, with our current prioritization, all of the drop-off stations will always have priority of exactly 100. So in that case, what the train will do is it will probably go to the nearest one every time. Personally, I found that annoying. I would rather it goes to each of the drop-off stations equally. The way I have accounted for it is to add a small random disturbance or change to the priority signal. So I do this by having first this constant combinator, and basically I just randomly pick one of these values via this random combinator. If you look on the right hand side, the output signal changes. I only care about the value. I don't care about the actual signal type. The output of this goes over here. This is translated to a p-value as well. These two p-values from these two combinators are combined and sent to the train stop. You can see how the priority signal actually keeps changing over and over. This means that in our example, where I have a bunch of drop-off stations for advanced circuits, they will each have between 110 and 119 priority, but which one has the highest priority will randomly change over time, so the train sometimes will go to one, sometimes another. Finally, this is how I do my requests. Let's first ignore the C value, although we've already talked about it. I look at what's the train limit on this station, so if I want one train, then L will be 1, but because of this minus, it will become -1. So therefore I will have -1 iron plate. That's how I add requests. Then the C value, both here and on the pickup stations, is how, in a way, I temporarily remove the requests, or the system knows that there have been trains assigned to them. Finally, let's look at the constant combinator. We have what item do we want here, and what's the requested amount, the max train limit, the number of wagons per train, the number of steel chests per wagon, the number of slots per chest, how many items a full train load has. This is the actual minimum number of items that we are requesting, which then for the combinators that do the priority signal is adjusted by dividing by 100. Now there's a couple extra caveats to this M value. What if we accidentally set this iron plate signal to much higher than how much the train station can handle? For iron plates, the train station can take up to 230,000 iron plates. What if we set this to 400,000? That the station would keep requesting a bunch of trains, but they would just be waiting at the station and not be able to drop off their items. This will adjust this value so that it is below the maximum capacity of the train station. In practice, this M value is either this value, or if this value is too high, then this will be set to the maximum capacity of the station minus one full train load. We can see an example by just pasting over, and let's just change this to 900,000. If you go here, instead of 900,000, this is actually 230,000 minus 16, 214. I talked about the train requests. I said they go onto the red wire, which are then passed on to radars, and this is how they're passed onto the trains. I have a radar here. I use the red wire to pass the request onto the train stations. Over here, we have some requests for the fuel because of the fuel station, and then these requests are sent to the train. It might be interesting to monitor these request signals. In order to make it simple, I'm going to remove all of the normal trains, and I'm also going to change the train limit here to 3. I'm going to keep a train station open, and I'm going to monitor the red signal. You can see we're requesting 3 trains here. 1 train is on its way, and the value of the red signal for iron plates is -2, as expected. So the train is on its way. It goes to the pickup station. Now what's going to happen is once this fills up, this station will still have a C value of 1. And once this station starts to leave, immediately this station will also have a C value of 1. So actually the system will think that we have already assigned 1 extra train, even though we haven't. And this will continue to be the case until the last wagon of the train has passed the train stop. Let's see this in action. Starts to leave, and now the value is -1, and will continue to be -1 until the train leaves. So right about now, there you go, -2. And we'll go over here. Once it fully leaves the station, this will go back to -3. It finishes unloading, and off it goes, and -3. And you'll see we'll go here. And let's also see how the train signaling happens. So let's look at the locomotive. It's waiting at the stop. Let's monitor this station. And once it gets the O signal, now let's see here. O signal is 1, and we have a negative signal here. So on the next tick, it will leave. There you go. It's working. It's heading to pick up, and off it goes. So now we understand how this works. Now we go on to the next issue and why this is needed. In order to demonstrate this, I will also add iron plates to this train station, and I will also add some infinity chests over here. And I'm going to set this M value to roughly half the station. Now I've made it so that the station is full. As you can see, we have 115,000 and we're requesting 114. We're also going to add back a bunch of trains. We're going to change their interrupts so that this is not a condition anymore. As soon as this station requests even a single train, all of these trains will leave because the train limit of these 2 stations is enough to take all of them in. In order to demonstrate this, I will just empty one of these chests, and you will see that the train limit will only be 1 here. Boop. But as you see, all of the trains have left. And let's see what happens. So they all try to pick up stuff. This is also stuck. And this wants to leave, but it's blocked by this train. And this won't leave because this has taken up the slot over here. But besides my issues with queuing up trains, let's just remove this just to make it clear. You can see that the train goes here, drops off its cargo, and now this is stuck because it cannot remove this cargo. And these trays are stuck too because they're waiting. Let's add back this condition and we'll see how this helps. Let's look at exactly what happens. I removed one of these, so the train limit will increase to 1. So now the output of this combinator is -1 iron plate. The signal here is also -1 iron plate. If I don't have the O signal, on the next tick, once again, all of these trains will leave. So ignore how this happened, but now the O signal is 1. And on the next tick, this train leaves. Since this train is going over here, we see that the C signal is now 1, but then it takes one extra tick to become an iron plate signal of 1. And now we can see here that the iron plate request is gone. This means that from the moment we got the iron plate request, we needed 2 ticks. This sets a hard constraint on this system. If we want to guarantee that we only send as many trains as we need, we can only send 1 train every 2 ticks. So how do we address this? We use a timer. So we have the train stop value here, and it will start at 0, and it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way to 22, and then starts over. Why up to 22? Because of this rail signal, and this rail signal is just this constant combinator that is below its station that adds 2. 2 here, 2 here, 2 here. Every train station adds 2 because we want 2 ticks between each train leaving. The timer goes to this constant combinator, and then I check, is the timer value equal to 2? Then send the O value. And you can see when it's equal, it sends the O value for 1 tick, and it does nothing the rest of the time. The rail signal is 2 for the first depot, 4 for the next one, 6 for the next one, 8, and all the way at the end is 22. How do we get these values? We have this combinator which starts with a rail signal of 0 and then adds 2, so it becomes 2. And then it passes on these 2 over here and also passes it here, which adds another 2, so that gives 4, passes it to here and here, goes to 6, and that's it. Pretty simple. One limitation here is that imagine all of these stations are empty. Imagine a train comes to the first station, and as soon as it arrives, this timer has the value 3. It will need to loop all around to the value 2 before the train can leave. I have somewhat addressed this. This is the difference between the slow and the fast version in the tileable blueprint book. What I've shown you so far is the slow version, and the good thing is that the slow version 100% guarantees that you will never send more trains than you need. This delay, in my opinion, is insignificant completely because with trains, you generally care about throughput rather than how fast they're gonna dispatch and go somewhere. However, if for some reason you don't like it, you can use the fast versions, and I'll just place them just for demonstration. You use them in exactly the same manner. Boop, and then boop. On these stations, I also read whether a train is stopped here. And this will only become a value higher than 0 when the tracer has actually stopped. Unlike the train count, which increases as soon as the train is assigned to the station. So now this signal from the constant combinator, along with the value t, passes on to this combinator. Only when we have a train stopped here do we pass this to rail signal. And then it's passed on to the timer and also to this one that increases the value, which is then used over here. The issue here is that sometimes you will get 2 trains living together because think about when a train comes, it needs to modify all of the values. When the train arrives here, because this takes a while to change, you may end up sending the train that just arrived together with another one. This is going to be pretty rare because we're talking about 1 to 2 ticks, and this is only when a train arrives. specifically. So if a request happens exactly when a train arrives, then this will happen. It's not a huge deal, and maybe people prefer this, but to me, I would just go with this one. It's safe, and I don't see really the value in this. Just in case people want to see this in action, let's see what we have now. You can see we're counting up to 4 because we have 2 trains right here. And that's pretty much it. And this has a value of 0. This has a value of 2. This has a value of 4. And then the rest just stay with the value 4. So what's going to happen when the train comes back? And let's just empty it quickly. So this left because we need it. Until it says train stopped, waiting at stop. There you go. This t value will become positive. So this passes on this value. This one is still 2, however, as is this. So you can see how sometimes it can cause 2 trains to leave when they're not supposed to. There's one more thing here, and it's the priority of the depots. This rightmost depot has 255 priority. The next one has 254, 253, and it keeps going that way. The idea behind this is that generally, however you build your depots and how they connect and how the trains come and how they leave, you might prefer some depots to have higher priority. For example, you may prefer this one because this one can leave the fastest. It's not a big deal, but I have added this as well. The way I do it is I just start with this constant combinator with 256, and then similarly to this combinator, we just kept adding 2. I have this combinator which subtracts 1 and then passes on the signal to the depot and the next one, and this keeps going like that, and that's it. If you want to reverse this, you can simply remove this, change this to +1, and copy it all over. Now the priority here is 1, 2, 3, and so on. Finally, let me talk about the city block versions. As I said, you need 1 copy of this on each planet and only 1 copy on each planet where you're going to use the city block depots. You place this anywhere. This is just a timer. It takes how many depots do I have, and then it passes on the signal through the red wire. Next, let's place some depots. You want to set this parameter to 1. And what you'll see here is that this gives you 112 directly. It's just 56 depots times 2, 112. This gets passed on to the radar, which therefore then gets passed on to here. And it's set to 112. The timer signal comes from the radar through the red signal, goes over here, and gets checked with 2 for the first one, 4 for the second one, and so on and so forth. This constant combinator is the one that had the parameter that we actually set to 1. This becomes -1. And in this case becomes 0 multiplied by 112. And then this is where the pattern starts. So I have 0 plus 2, 2, which sets this value. And then again, 2 plus 2, 4, which sets this value. Same idea as before. If I place a second copy, now I need to set this to 2. And if I place a third copy to 3, and when I set this to 2, this still gives 112. So now the timer will count to 224. But this 2 value becomes 1, then becomes 112, then plus 2 is 114. So therefore this will have 114. If you go to a different planet, once again, place 1 copy of this, and then this starts again with the parameter being 1, 2, 3. When I tried to do LTN on my own, I had figured out everything except this timer idea. I took this idea from someone else. He also explains how it works, so if my explanation didn't fully make sense, I will have a link to 2 of his videos. They are kind of long. The first one is 1 hour, the second was 20 minutes. If you watch them, maybe then it will make sense how the red signal is used in order to get requests to the trains. But anyway, I did take the idea from him, So credit where it's due. I did improve upon it with dialable depots and automatic connections and some other stuff. But anyway, it is very important, just like we separate the fluid from the solid trains, each type of train needs to have its own group. And you can even have subgroups. If, for example, you have trains on one part of the map and on the other part of the map, you will need to separate them by group. You will need to separate the depots. So you will need different depots for 1/6 trains, for example. You would also need different interrupt names. You will need to have item pickup 1/6 and return depot 1/6. And then here you will need to change this to signal pickup 1/6, pickup 1/6, drop off 1/6. And then the stations themselves would need to be changed. The stations should be 1/6. If your depots are long enough, then you could potentially share depots of many kinds of trains. Although I'm not sure that's desired, because you may want a different timer for each type of train. If you want to have two different groups of train doing the same item, for example iron plate, then you will not be able to use the global radar network for passing along the requests. You will need to completely separate the two networks and use a red wire from this combinator to go, for example, to here and then onto one of the networks. And you need to delete the radar. You will have to do the same for every pickup and drop-off station and then connect it to your depots for the first network and then similar do the same for your second group of trains. You could also have one set of requests on the radar and another set going purely through power poles. And this is a good way to segue onto the last part, creating your own stations. I'll create one for pickup and for drop-off, and then the fluids are similar idea. Let's do a solid pickup station. Put it down somewhere. You're not going to change any of this. There may be many things that you want to change. You may want to move this on the other side. You may want to have chests only on one side. You may not want to have 6 chests per side. You may want to have 4 or 2 or whatever. You may want the belts to come from the side. Whatever changes you want to do, go ahead. To make it easy for yourself, cut and paste or rotate, whatever you want to do. And then when you paste it somewhere, just click accept. Same thing here, cut, accept. The important thing is for the chest that you connect them all together with a green wire and then pass the signal onto here, which will connect to here on its own. So after you put this down, you can make your station here. And let's just make a simple example. Let's say we want 4 chests. Let's do it like this, and then like this, and then 2 more. And let's connect them. And then let's say we put 2 more, connect them like that. And let's add some electric poles, let's say here, here, and here. So our station will be 1 locomotive, 2 wagons, 4 chests per wagon, and what the hell, let's say legendary quality. First, we need to change the name. Since it's 1-2, we're gonna call it 1-2. We're gonna leave the parameterization here. This we do not need to change, and we don't need to change any of these. We don't need to change anything here. The only thing we need to change is over here. So this will be set by the user. It's the max train limit. This is how many wagons, and we need 2 wagons. We set this to 4 because it's 4 per wagon, and we set this to 120. These ones you should keep as negative. You need to make sure that this has a unique value. So it can't be 2, it can't be 4, it can't be 120, and of course it doesn't make sense to be negative. This has to do with how SpaceAge does parameterization. So if I have this to 1, and then I make my blueprint, then when a user puts down your blueprint, and let's say they set this to 3, this will be set to 3 also. The next thing to do is make a blueprint. Let's save it, and let's just name it 1-2. The next thing is to go to the parameterization. Now this is the important thing. What did we set it to? We set it to 5. You need to go here and see. It says signal 5 times locomotive in constant combinator. That's all it should say. And just to demonstrate this, Let's change this to, for example, 1. Let's blueprint this again. And now if I go to parameterization and I go to 1, you can see it's actually set by a number of things. Let's set this back to 5. After you've made sure that this only shows itself, go to one of my blueprints, go to the parameterization, copy this. Maybe print screen. You can also copy these formulas. This one, you can see the whole thing, so you don't need to copy, but let's copy this one. So there's a parameter, we call it item. What item do we want? The next is the max train limit, which is 5, and we kept it at 5, so we're going to put it here. Select as parameter. The next is the slots per chest, and we set it to 120. So let's bring it up here. And you can see this is also a variable. I set to S. And then here, it's up to you if you want for your own self or for others, if you set your blueprint, whether you're going to say ignore. Now, unfortunately, these 3 parameters are going to show no matter what. When someone puts down your station, it's slots per chest. Then you need to do the same. So you find the number of wagons. We set it to 2. Now, as you see, this isn't shared with anything. This is shared with the light. So this, for sure, the user shouldn't change. And it wouldn't make sense to change it. So number of wagons, and this is also a parameter, and a variable with the letter W. And we have chest per wagon, which we set to 4. This is also a parameter with a letter C. And then we need to bring up these negative ones. These are both parameters, and these both have formulas. This is the item per full train load, and this is the max items when station full divided by 100. If you want, you can write them, but just to speed things up, this is the stack size times 40 slots that each wagon has, times the number of wagons. And then this one, we copied it. Let's paste it. So what is this? Like I say, it's the max items when station is full. So the stack size of the item times how many slots do we have per chest times how many chests per wagon? 4. So 120 in each chest times 4. And times the number of wagons, 2. So 4 times 2. And then I divide by 100 because I want to use for priority. And you can use some names here, it doesn't matter. And that's it. You save it, and now you can use it. Boom. You can set the item. Let's set it to copper plate. Now you can change the train limit, doesn't matter. You can set it to 1 or whatever. And there you go. That's your own station. 1 to 2. These are all set correctly. Okay, let's also do a drop-off station. So we take this again, just put it down and just confirm. Don't change anything. And once again, you can do whatever you want here. And then first off, we need to do the train stop, change this to 1, 2. The only other things we need to change is over here. Again, let's suppose we change this to 2, change this to 4, and change this to 120. And maybe you also want to change the default of how much it requests. And then let's say we have built whatever you want here, blueprint it, save it, go here, let's say drop off, put it here, and then we'll do the parameterization again. You can go here, and then print screen, and then copy paste this formula just because it's the longest. And then we can start doing the stuff. So item, then we find the requested, which is here, 40,000, drag it up, and drag it up. And here's the number requested. And we're also calling it a variable m. And I think you get the idea. You need to copy the same. You need to find what you set, the max train limit, the slots per chest, the number of wagons, the chest per wagons, and then find the -1s and set the correct formulas. And once again, the parameters that the user can change, make sure they are on their own. So this 40,000 value must only be here, just like the max train limit here. Let's also look at the fluid pickups a bit. So if we go to the pickup station, you can see this is a lot simpler. because there's no stack size and we know exactly how many storage tanks we have. This doesn't change, it's 25,000. We know how many fluid wagons we have, and we know how many storage tanks we have. So we can see that now we can hard code some of these values. We know, for example, that a full train will always have 200,000 in fluid, and we know that 25,000 times 31 is 775,000. So if we divide this by 100, this is the value we get for M. However, drop-offs still remain somewhat complex because we don't know how much fluid we're requesting. While the value of F is still 200,000 and we can hard code it, the rest of them, like M, depends on how much we were requesting, and same with N. When you want to make your own stations and you pick one of these blueprints, make sure that you do not edit any of the parameters here. Just click confirm and then go onto the constant combinators and make any change that you want. With fluids, when you place them down, you'll see that these two parameters have taken values already. I would recommend changing them back to minus 101 and minus 102, and then making sure that you've set them correctly. Same deal with the drop-off. You can see this change, so set them to minus 101, 102, and minus 103. Let me also talk about 4 limitations of what I have that prevent this from being fully LTN. The first is the usage of red wire signals to pass the requests through radars. This means that for any item that we are transporting via the LTN system, the player cannot use the same signal via the red wire on radars. Otherwise, the LTN system will just break. The second one, which is arguably the most important one, is that trains always go from depot to pick up, drop off, and back to depot. Ideally, they should be able to go from depot to pick up, drop off, and then back to pick up, if that's needed. However, to accommodate this, you will need to pass both the signal parameter onto the drop-off stations and this signal onto the drop-off stations. This one is pretty easy, but this one would be a mess, and I can't think of an easy solution that doesn't require a lot of manual actions in order to achieve it. Thirdly, we have the fact that we can only do one train per 2 ticks for each request, which I did not mention earlier. And finally, we cannot mix different trains and stations. For example, we cannot use one for trains and stations and 1 6 and trains and stations for the same item. Personally, I think the first one is not particularly restrictive, but players may run into issues by accident if they forget about this. The third one I also think is not really an issue. With trains, you care mostly about the throughput. I don't think anyone has ever built a base where they needed more than 30 trains per second. The fourth one is annoying, but I wouldn't say it's the biggest deal. And the second one is clearly something that ideally you would improve if you could. I don't know if any of these can be fixed with smarter circuitry. I think it's plausible that especially the fourth one could be fixed. If anyone does figure out something, please let me know, and I'll of course give credit if you don't want to upload them on your own. But yeah, I thought about them for a while and I couldn't figure out something. And honestly, this is good enough. That will do it. Thank you for watching and enjoy the blueprints.